All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samu?
We've got Wheel of Time. New spring continuing on. We've been actually making pretty good progress through this one. Uh, Pacing it out pretty well. I don't. How far did you want to get today?
I have no idea.
Well, let's just go with it, and we'll make sure we leave enough time because we want to do a little fun thing at the end where
Yes.
we equate Wheel of Time characters to modern, well, the history of MMA, modern MMA fighters. So I made a nice extensive list. I will have to admit that we are I at least mostly just have the males because I'm
Hmm.
not familiar with enough female fighters. Because my thing about current MMA is there's just so many shows. It's just constantly going.
Hmm.
And it used to be back in the day you'd get a title fight every 3 months or so, and you were just at the edge of your seat waiting for it. But now I can't even keep track of everybody. Realistically, it's just too much. There's going to be modern
Yeah.
people that probably fit the bill better, but I haven't been up to speed enough to have put them in there. So you're going to see mostly people from the 90s and mid 2000s or early 2000s in my group, in my listings. But yeah, we'll try to get that in. And I don't know. Gosh, I'm at chapter 23 now, so it's definitely just like you did, just keep going with it
Yeah.
because I forgot how good this one was, and it's so fresh that I'm it's like I'm reading it for the first time in a lot of cases.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I was. And it's like I said last time, it's really cool to go backwards and it really shows off Jordan's skill at writing and how deep he understands his characters because you can see that these are the characters we know, but they're not the same.
Hmm.
So there's a paradox there because they are younger, they're 20 years younger, they haven't had the life experience. Things get real serious real fast here. Um, but at the beginning, they're very young.
Hmm. Well, what did we decide? Land was about 25, and
I think
Walrain
so.
Walrain would be it probably the equivalent of the girls and the boys in the original. She'll be just a couple years younger because she went to the tower very young,
Hmm.
and she spent 3 and 3 novice and accepted.
I think so.
So
Yeah, I
she's
think
probably
that's what
about
they did.
20, 22, 23.
And she went when I think it gives an age somewhere when she's thinking back, and I want to say it was like 15.
Does it say the year that this book starts when it gives you her perspective? Because I could tell you when she was born.
I don't think it does. But it's probably in your big compendium book.
That's what I'm looking for right now.
Yeah. Um,
Oh.
so we're on chapter 10, and we touched on it last time because we were going through Maureen's test, and it finishes up on the first several pages um of chapter 10 and uh how harsh the last test is. Uh and nobody says anything, but she can tell that Elida was responsible for that one, and even the other Aes Sedai, even though this is supposed to be an incredibly hard test.
She's
I
22 at this point of the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
So um I mean the age correlates pretty well because you're fresh out of college and you think
You know everything.
you think you know everything, but you're still pretty darn immature.
Yeah. And not only fresh out of college, you didn't have a realistically, as we find out in this chapter, they don't get their internship till they're actually in the shawl because there's so many secrets they don't tell the
Hmm.
accepted.
Hmm.
So yeah, they teach some classes, but that's more of being a TA than an intern.
But then there are things you don't find out until you gain the shawl about Aes Sedai in general. And then even more that you have to learn about your Ajah, that are secrets to that Ajah, so they don't talk about those except within the Ajah.
Yeah, I got a
So
couple comments there. But
so it's you know it's kind of like a doctor's residency of long hours and lots of stress.
you brought up so you mentioned something a few minutes ago that remember the question I asked you last night?
Oh yeah.
You said because you could tell Jordan was writing his characters.
Hmm.
Need someone to do this, and it has to be someone who has access to all the notes. Have Chat GPT or Bard or one of the AI systems read only the ones Jordan wrote, and then take his notes and rewrite the last few books and
Hmm.
see and then have all the nerds read it and compare it to the Brando Sando versions.
That would be interesting. It would never happen officially, but if somebody could make it happen, that would be
the
awesome.
we could you could probably have it finish the books, but it would be inaccurate to anything he changed that was still held secret in the notes.
Yes,
It would
yes.
it'd probably guess 75% of it right.
Hmm.
I would bargain. But that 25% probably makes a big difference.
There are, and we'll get into it when we get there, but there are a few major things that there just really aren't very good hints leading up to those last three books. So it would be curious without looking at those books to see the events that happen. It would be interesting what something like GPT would come up with for certain things that were foretold, certain things in the prophecies and dreams and foretellings that he really didn't give hints to at all.
Yeah.
Uh, One thing in particular that's really hard to figure out because there are just no hints. Really? Okay, so I feel like the reason the other Aes Sedai are kind of giving a lie to the side eye here is because the point here is to stress,
Hmm.
but by making it personal, Elida has, well, it's like the difference between giving, you know, uh, so like if you're in a debate class and your teacher or professor is playing devil's advocate to really push you hard to think, to come up with, arguments and strains of logic versus attacking you ad hominem
Hmm.
and making you have to debate that way. And this was an ad hominem attack. And they're supposed to be professionals is the way I feel like the other Aes Sedai are looking sideways at Elida.
Well, the hard part here though is you could actually justify it because remember the White Tower is tower above all.
Hmm.
That's one of the beefs I think a lot of us normal people have with the White Towers because it's very apparent that you
Yes.
are supposed to not you are supposed to choose the tower over everything else, Uberalis, over all your family included. So, I mean, realistically, that makes that a legitimate test. Can you still choose the tower?
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I think it is a little different with Moiraine though, because she was orphaned. So, and not that long ago, her father died, and then I believe when it talks about how both her and Siuan are orphans, that I believe her mother died while she was in the tower. So she doesn't really have the connections to stray from that ideal, really. And the added depth of loss on top of that, the
Well, and it tells you something about the test too, because there's no way Elida could have made an accurate depiction of her father. So some of this was from inside their own mind, as we talked about.
Mm, that's a good point. That's a good point. So that's
There would be no way because Elida was in the tower. She was just raised up a year
mhm.
before Moiraine here, and she was accepted and a novice longer. So it's realistically, and I don't even think she was a noble going into it. So it's There's no way she could have known what Moraine's father looked or acted like.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's kind of further evidence that this is tied to not just the dream world, but dreams, literal dreams, the individual's dreams.
Which makes you wonder if the testers had insight into their weaknesses.
Well, I thought I speculated on that last time is that you've known the women who are getting tested, you've known them for years. You've, maybe taught them in classes, so you know their strengths and weaknesses. So in
I
that
mean, even
way,
deeper than that.
yes.
Yeah.
But
Like
that's
like
the
in the
thing.
scene with the brambles and the spiders. What, it wasn't I picked this spider on purpose. It was like a thought or a weave that is like
Mhm.
make her biggest bug fear come to life. You know.
Uh, the other interesting thing about this scene, though, in these first few pages of the chapter, um, that that kind of raises the eyebrow is there is an element of there's a thought that can cross your mind of hey, Jordan, plot hole here. Um, if Elida was always like this, how in the world did she ever get enough support to be raised Amarillan, especially in the dubious way she was raised?
Well, but that's the thing. She's an authoritarian ruler. And when what we see in Elida, I just justified a very horrible thing she did. And what do we
Hmm.
call her? The worst. But does she ever really do anything wrong? No, she just represents everything horrible about the tower.
Hmm.
And that's what typically authoritarian rulers are. They are the heavy hand that is within the rules.
Well, also knowing where things are going to end up, then seeing how bad Elida was from the beginning, it really hammers home what the next part of this chapter is, which is um the twisted mesh of politics and alliances and animosities among the Ajahs.
Mm-hmm.
That even though she's so unlikable, her and her cabal were able to manipulate those political currents such that they kind of short-circuited the good sense of enough people that they could look past that because we're going to get this political win. When if they had stepped back and really thought about it, they might have come to the conclusion of, are you kidding? She's awful.
Mm-hmm.
She's as a number of the Saladar sisters, um, Egwene, Siuan, a number of them think or outright say, she's terrible. She is going to lead to disaster because of her temperament.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's why they split.
she was the horrible thing people thought they needed to rectify the situation. It reminds me of the stories you hear about Saddam Hussein when he took power,
Mm,
where his first, basically, he was the ruthless general. And when something needed to be fixed because chaos was ensuing, he jumped in, filled that void, but people hated him,
hmm
but they feared him. And we see this
hmm
with Elida later. Spoiler alert, I guess, on this one.
We've already seen some of it because we've gotten
Yeah.
a few. We're gonna get a
Yeah,
lot
well,
more
we've
going
seen
forward.
what the part I'm talking about, the analogy, because there was one giant meeting where he picked out two people and how they were traitors, shipped them right out, and nobody wanted to be the next. So everybody was trying to capitulate all the way up to mimicking his movements and facial expressions. If he wiped his nose, they wiped their nose. If he scratched his butt, they would scratch their butt. So they could stand out so little that they weren't the next picked.
I think I've mentioned it before, but there was a good series on Netflix, which is shocking considering how much we ranted about Queen Cleopatra a couple days ago. But How to Become a Tyrant. It's narrated by Peter Dinklage, and it goes through each episode is a different modern tyrant. Stalin, Hitler, Saddam, and then what's his name? The African guy, Idi Amin. and Gaddafi. Those are the ones they go through, and so each one is kind of a different part of the playbook of how to become a tyrant that they focus on.
Yeah, usually with these not benevolent dictators, there's a hatred, but also a level of respect.
Mhm.
And Elida, she's absolutely capable. She's just horrible.
Mhm.
And realistically, eventually the horrible catches up where it outpaces the capableness. Uh,
Yep. Um, oh, another little nugget here that I like before we move on with the test is the parallel with uh was it a Egwene's test where she had those notes and she was terrified of someone like looking through her
mhm.
stuff while she was in the test, and she's got that book that she's been writing names in of of uh of children that they need to investigate further to see if this is the one they're looking for. So I like that little parallel.
Now I need to go back to the accepted test and see if it mentions anything on Siuan, like she looked at the clothes or anything that it would indicate that he's connecting these two events.
Hmm.
All right. So, hooray, she passes.
Um, she does, Sawan does. There's a comment there from the same from Sawan that uh she where is it on 151, yeah, is she slapped her belt pouch where she also carried her book of names, but uh, um I almost swallowed my heart when I remembered this. So same thing. And then you get a girly moment where they're all excited because they're going to get raised forever. Um,
Raised together, not forever.
and then and then they decide to put mice in Elida's bed.
Yeah, and realistically, the you see it later in the books that he's setting up Moiraine's behavior later
Hmm.
as having her with Siuan as the two tricksters of the tower.
Yeah. So not only because they're great friends, not only do they share this mentality that leads them both to the blue, but it makes perfect sense that they enter into this 20-year conspiracy of just the two of them because they're secretive tricksters. Deep down, despite the Aes Sedai serenity and the focus that you see later, deep down, they're they're a little Loki. All right. Um, any thoughts on the okay, so chapter 11 is the actual ceremony to be raised as Aes Sedai and
Mm-hmm.
swear the oaths. Um,
And it was so the interaction here where they argued about who goes first and who gets to swear the oaths first and everything. You know, when you look at the concept, the the literature behind the concept of the BFF,
mhm.
the girl's best friends forever. This is exactly the what the textbook would say was happening. And you know, I'm not a girl with a BFF, but it seems to be from the outside looking in what you see.
Not only that where he really gets, really nails that, but then also after a while I started going, why is he spending so much time on this? And then it kind of dawned on me because especially with what we're about to find out, as Sawan and Moiraine learn more and more about what it really means to be an Aes Sedai, they're that pedantic that that it matters that much that you know counting the days practically of who was novice a shorter time, who's accepted a shorter time, who's worn the shawl longer. All of these things, especially when it starts, when they get into the nuances of who defers to who and how they rank themselves, that they are that pedantic and hierarchical.
which is funny because it this hierarchy, we called it a hierarchy. It's different than a male hierarchy
Hmm.
because it's doing so many mental gymnastics to remove meritocracy from it.
That's a good point because the kind of stereotype is that, well, the biggest buffest guy, you just flex, and that's how males hierarchy. Well, not exactly. That the biggest buffest guy flexes, and he's the leader because so much of what men do is physical. So that that is the merit of sports or hunting or fighting or whatever. That yeah, it's going to be the biggest and the strongest most of the time. But when you get away from those arenas, then uh, competence goes a long way within groups of men.
Well, and there's a nuance to it because when you talk about the social male, the biggest buffest dude also has to be a cooperator because biggest and buffest only helps you against one lesser buff person.
Hmm.
Two slightly lesser buff people will take out the bigger buffer person, and there's always the threat of that. So you have to be a cooperator to be a leader. You can't be just the biggest and buffest.
Hmm.
Whereas females won't do that. The biggest with the power here gets the deference of everybody, even if two slightly lower ones want to gang up on her. Because it doesn't work that way. You always defer. This is the rule. This is tower unwritten law.
Hmm.
Whereas the men, you know what? You're a crappy ass leader. I don't care if you're bigger because Daryl and his other brother Daryl are going to help me take you out.
Yep.
Men,
Um,
this is the big mistake. Everybody thinks over the course of history, women domesticated men. Men domesticated men because we form coalitions against other men.
um, okay, so another little nugget that I like that is he mentions in this chapter, and then he mentions again later because apparently it sticks with you for a while, is foreshadowing something that's a little spoilery, which is the physical effect of the oath.
Hmm.
Because
We see it
uh
having an overt physical effect on her from her mind.
we've only seen it once in the series when oh, I'm brain farting. The Cooladin's lady, Savannah,
So okay.
when she gets the oath rod from Sammy and makes Galena swear on it, Galena Casban, and we see a strong physical reaction, but we don't understand just what's going on because it's not from her perspective. It's from the outside looking in. Now we get it from the inside. We see just what it is doing to the body and that the weird kind of tightness. Um, you know, I think of it like uh if you've ever done a lot of running in South Texas in the summer. So I had a soccer tournament. It was like a Memorial Weekend soccer tournament, and so we had to play two games pretty close together in one day. And when your calves not up,
Mm-hmm.
if you've never had it happen, just you may have seen it like watching football. When that happens, holy cow, that's painful, and you can't move. And that's kind of what I envision it as is something akin to that, not as severe, but over your whole body. And so I think he is foreshadowing something that's going to come in a couple of books that we're going to see in a couple of books.
Of course, now that I think about it, there had to be, you know, with Black Sisters. Galena had that happen to her because she was separated from the Oath Rod at some point. All of these Black Sisters had to be a regular sister for a certain amount of time to have the ageless
Hmm.
face.
Hmm.
Or else somebody would have been like, hey, she's been an Aes Sedai for quite some time and she still doesn't have an ageless face. So I don't know if there's in the recruitment they do it later, or in the recruitment they're
Well,
like, you're gonna have to skirt the truth a lot
let's
for
talk
a
about
little
that in
while.
spoilers, because
Okay.
yeah. All right, so then they make their choice, and so all the others leave, and the blues lead them to the blue. Um, the blue. Did you talk about this last time? I thought. I feel like you brought this up. Isn't this where Moiraine is thinking about how all the all the sections are equal sized,
Mm-hmm.
which seems odd to her, doesn't make any sense because, you know, cl surely even at the time of the tower's founding, they weren't all equally sized, just because women being women and the kinds of women that are attracted to the tower are going to have particular inclinations, so it shouldn't be a huge surprise that red and green are the biggest. And surely that's how it's always been. So then why are they all equal sized? Um,
I made a note for this for page 158, but I'm not seeing the line I quoted.
and this goes into a little bit of what you kind of teased last time, which is the way women form coalitions and the way animus is created between them. That, everything he does is on purpose, pretty much, and that's why we tend to read way too much into it sometimes. But I don't think it's an accident. She's having that thought as they're going, and then we're about to find out that's just a facade. The idea of all the Ajahs are equal are just a facade because they're about to find out the the twists and turns of the alliances
Mm-hmm.
uh amongst the Ajahs and those who oppose each other as well. So she's having this thought of this doesn't make sense, and then Jordan's about to show you, yeah, it's all a facade anyway. It's all
The
just window dressing.
the passage I was looking for is actually bottom of 157. The blue sought to right wrongs, which was not always the same as seeking justice. And my brain just immediately went, oh, social justice warriors. The blues are social justice warriors. Ibram X. Kendi would be a blue.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
It's it's a good point. It's how they can the Siuan and Moiraine can rationalize what they're doing, which is
Well, I mean, they're breaking every tower law at some point to save the world.
exactly they 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 mention that in their conversation at the beginning of the Great Hunt that I think it's Siuan who says, yeah, I think it's Siuan who says
I thought it
something
was in
to the effect of
episode 7 in some weird dream
uh,
world place after there's some snoo snoo.
some incredibly cringy snoo snoo. I swear it's like a 13-year-old boy wrote that scene.
That's
Um,
because you have two actresses that aren't lesbians and they were just trying their hardest, is probably what it was.
that could be a significant component to it, yes. But I believe it's Siuan who says something to the effect of, if the sisters out there knew what we were doing, knew what we were talking about, they would still us and birch us, and I'm not sure they would be wrong. Because they're if they're not exactly breaking tower law, because there is some fuzzy gray area there, they're certainly bending the heck out of it. Bend
Mhm.
it, damn near broke the thing off. See, that's my peppy, Steve. Okay, so I hadn't noticed that. That one didn't catch my eye, but that's a good point. That explains a lot about how the blues are the way they are. Well, we have seen this, so this isn't a
Well, and
spoiler.
also why, even though they're considered the good guys in a lot of the book,
Hmm.
they're so hated by the other sisters
Hmm.
in a lot of ways. And
Well,
it probably explains the animosity between the Reds and the Blues to some degree.
consider what we see when Siuan and Leanne finally make it to Saladar, and they're trying not to get shoved aside, so they need to prove their worth. And the way they do that is with their spy networks. That not only did Siuan uh not only was she intimately familiar with the Blue Spire network, which we're about to see why and how, but then she ran her own as the Emerylin. She had her own separate, just hers, and that kind of make them look askance at her. But why should you be surprised about that? But then the one that really surprised them was when Leanne said, "I had my own eyes and ears in the city itself."
Mm-hmm.
That I kept tabs on what was going on in the city. I can get us information about what's going on in Tarvalon. And they went, "What?" But it shouldn't be surprising at all because they're blues. This is what they do.
Yeah, and when you talk about the animosity with the Reds, what's going back further, no, they don't even know why. Well, if you're a group of people that will do anything for the cause, which group of people, they talk about the Greens liking warders, no, but which group of people is the most likely to want to capitulate a channeling man if it felt like it was the right thing to do? Which we see at the penultimate, point of all these books when it comes to the blues or Swan and Moiraine.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you wonder if that happened in the past with a false dragon or something.
Uh, it also kind of puts the next few pages here in an interesting light, where Rafaela is talking about the customs that some of the more bizarre customs that they used to follow, like walking to your new Ajah quarters and naked, um, and kind of her idea that custom for custom's sake isn't a bad thing. That yes, these seem silly. Yes, these seem outdated and unnecessary, but there is a good, in her view, there's a good to following custom for custom's sake.
And spoken like a true conservative. We're gonna get to an example of that, not
Uh,
today, but when we get to land way later,
mm,
because a lot of the point of his internal thoughts are, well, this is why I do this because that's just the right thing to do. That's honorable. Da 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 da. But then we get to some stuff he's doing for honor that from his culture that you're like, yeah, cringe.
yeah, that's that. Yeah, yeah. We'll get there. Um, all right. Um, I think the before we go to the next chapter, the last bit here in this chapter on 160, um, I think he's setting the stage for what they're about to learn from the head of the blue down at the bottom of 160, where Leanne tells them that they have to meet with the first selector, the head of our Ajah, and Rafaela puts in quickly, "You must never reveal that title." Not only do they not reveal who the head of the Ajah is, you're not even allowed to reveal the title of what the Ajah head is within that Ajah. So talk about, a mystery wrapped in an enigma. Uh, I mean, Jordan's really kind of laying on thick here. What something we have heard throughout the first 7 books so far, that lots of people think the Aes Sedai invented the game of houses. Well, yeah, I mean, you're seeing it here, and Moraine kind of has thoughts along this line of, you know, she thought she was skilled because even as a teenager, she still needed to be careful. She still needed to be savvy and wary of Karheen and politics. But this is a whole new level,
Mm-hmm.
even to her. All right, so on to chapter 12. Um, let's see. Ah, yes. And so 163, then we get more of um we get more of the blueness here, kind of going along with what you pointed out of um the right thing isn't always justice, or however that was phrased. Um da, 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 da. Anaya saying, it's unusual for the first selector also to be a sitter, Anaya went on, but unlike some, we blues like to make full use of ability. Folding her shawl and laying across one arm, Karen nodded. Edith is perhaps the most capable blue in the last 100 years, but if she were a brown or a white, they'd let her putter off wherever she wanted. Oh yes, Cabriana, there's a name we know. Some of the Brown sisters have been disgraceful, for sitters at least, but Browns always let their minds wander. In any case, you may rest assured that whatever talents you have, a use will be found for them.
Everybody, or to each their ability.
From each according to his ability, to each according to his need. I believe is how that good old communist saying goes.
Yeah, and that's when I want to tell anybody who wants to go down that route is, if you put the government in charge, they will the ability they expect from you is greater than your, oh, I have to work 8 hours a day in a boring job.
Um. Oh, I do like, before we get on to meeting with First Selector Edith and then the other stuff that happens. I do like being inside Moraine's head and seeing how much of a stuffy Karhinen she is, that she doesn't like the fact that the cushions and things all have ruffles and lace on them, and it's unseemly. Things should be more plain. Um all right, and then we get into the all right, so page 167 is when they finally meet with Edith and learn. Yeah, we've already learned this a bit from when Nynaeve and Elaine are raised by Egwene, and you get that they should be deferring to us because we're so much stronger, but they don't treat them like real Aes Sedai, which is part of the tension there. So we've already seen a little bit of this, but it's
Which
I'm
makes it
curious.
which makes a caricature of the whole system,
Exactly.
because there should be no reason they defer to Nynaeve and Elaine as basically not fully trained people brought up. Yeah, they had the hardship bonus and the merit bonus, but at the same time, when it comes to knowing what to do, they don't have the education, they don't have the practice, they don't have anything. But because of the system, they felt entitled.
Exactly. Um, and it's extra odd because of the way he describes this scene of here on the top of page 167. So this is Edith squirming on her seat cushion. Siuan appeared about to stand when Edith finally turned to face them. Uh, Folding her arms beneath her rest, she took a deep breath. For 6 years, you have been taught that the second greatest rudeness is to speak directly of someone's strength in the one power. Her mouth twisted again briefly. In truth, I find it difficult to do so now, necessary though it is. For 6 years, you have been strongly discouraged from thinking of your own strength in the power or anyone else's. Now you must learn to compare your strength to that of every sister you meet. In time, it will become second nature, blah, blah, blah. This is how we have the hierarchy. Um, the higher she stands above you, the greater your deference. Failure in that is the third greatest rudeness, and only third by a hair. The most common reason for new sisters to be given penance is a misstep of that sort. Moiraine nodded slowly, thinking, okay, because she'd been noticing why is this sister deferring to that sister? Why is this one yielding to that one and whatnot? And that thought came very hard. When the White Tower wanted to strongly discourage something, it was well and truly discouraged. Light, the tower rooted something out of you, then made you use that very thing to determine precedence. What a tangle. So even still, uh, as Edith says, it's uncomfortable for her to talk about it, but it's necessary. So let me talk about strength in the power. From the outside looking in, and perhaps from being male, that makes absolutely no sense. If that's the case, then why do you do it like this?
Mhm.
It is, as Moiraine thinks, a tangle. It's also rather
Well,
bizarre.
because in a commune, it keeps order to have a system that nobody can argue with. That to go back to 90 Van Lane, it causes a problem because all of a sudden the sisters don't want to go along with the system because it's been punched in their face how flawed the system is. Even though, and by this one's thoughts, you know how they're all thinking about it anyways.
Hmm.
So they all think it's flawed consciously, and then it gets thrown in their face with this very unorthodox situation. And all of a sudden, the system starts falling apart because, well, guess what? People don't want to do this weird thing anymore. And again, that's exactly how communes fall apart.
And we've already seen, you know, I'm curious where and when the idea for New Spring came to Jordan, because he's already commented on this several books earlier, primarily with the introduction of Cerealia and Egwene thinking about how she would have never even been tested for accepted. That's how weak she is in the power. And yet she's basically the strongest, the highest, the leader of all the wise ones. They all defer to her because of her strength of character and her experience. And so she has these thoughts of, and this is kind of one of the rants of Scott and you about Egwene, is she becomes more Aes Sedai later, but there in the Fires of Heaven, especially, she's thinking through, why do Aes Sedai do it this way? And then they miss out on someone like Cerealia, who's a real asset to the Wise Ones.
Well, just like your biggest, strongest guy example, doesn't mean he's got a brain in his noggin.
Hmm.
And same thing, if you're the biggest, strongest Aes Sedai, doesn't mean you can be rational, or doesn't mean you have a quick mind, or
You, brain in his noggin just reminded me of, and we didn't talk about it when it happened, and we should have, because it is one of my favorite scenes in the whole book. I can't remember where it happens. It's shortly after Bashir shows up, and Rand asks him, "Why are you following me? You know at some point I'm going to go mad, and you have to be worried about it. You have to be looking for it." And then he tells the story of when he was just old enough to sit a saddle, he was following this general who's, I can't remember his name, who was the Marshal General of Saldea at that time, and he was madder than a marsh hare. He once had us chop down a grove of oaks because they were looking at him funny. Then he had us give them all proper burials. Do you know how long it takes to bury an oak? But he was the best general anyone had ever seen in their lifetimes. So yeah, he's a loon, but when it comes down to, as rednecks say, nut cutting time, he's the one you want to have. Um, which is a very male thing. I don't think you would see that as much in with women.
I think it's more nuanced, but I think you
Mm,
would. I
okay.
mean, how many groups of girls follow the prettiest one around because she's the prettiest? It's like I say about almost everything. It's the same thing presented differently.
That's true. That's true. Um, I like that Jordan doesn't exactly explain it all here. Uh, so there's some confusion here at the bottom of 167 that he doesn't really resolve. Um, which is to your point, this is an objective standard, and they need some way of creating a hierarchy, but there's also kind of a messy, fuzzy gray area here, which is, do we have to obey them? Siuan asked, finally giving in and standing on Edith's side heavily. I thought I was quite clear, Siuan. The higher she stands above you, the greater your deference. I truly dislike talking about this, so please don't make me repeat myself. But you didn't answer her question. Because there's a difference between deference and obeying.
Well, but that's the constant Aes Sedai wiggle room, just like the wiggle room
Mm-hmm.
around the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I deferred to her, but she didn't directly tell me to do exactly that thing, so I just did it my way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then we get
But
this.
again, back to my SJW thing. Isn't it funny that it's based on an immutable characteristic? Intersectionality. I'm the most
Uh,
intersectional one here. You must defer to me. I'm the black trans person in the wheelchair.
um. All right, so then we get to the next interesting little tidbit here, which is Siuan getting roped in by what is clearly the head of the eyes and ears of the Blues. Um, but of course she never says that. Uh, but I like her introduction here, as at the bottom of 168, uh, by your description, the pretty little porcelain doll you are, Moiraine. Moiraine stiffened. A pretty little porcelain doll? I like how much she dislikes that. Uh, I don't know why that amuses me so, but I like it.
Well, because she's like you said, the trickster, the prankster, the noble tomboy.
Mm, it's a good point.
She even brings up at some point playing in the mud. I think that's a little bit later
Mm.
after she leaves, but yeah, she even brings up playing in the mud and dirt.
I also think it's a little bit of her short man syndrome that every once in a while you get the I think it's kind of wrapped up in that as well of how annoyed she is that she has to look up at everybody.
There, uh, let me make a note because I don't want to spoil later. But
Uh-huh.
it's an interaction with her and Lan, and she gets incredulous. But I'm like, he's one of the biggest guys in the books. You're one of the smallest people in the books. It's not
Hmm.
even that you're a girl.
Hmm.
There's some. I mean, you're probably what 105, 100 tops pounds. He's probably about 250 and all muscle.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I'm
Um,
only 200 pounds and I can dumbbell row 150 pounds for reps. So it's not far fetched to say Lan could just pick her up with one arm and bicep curl her, like the guy did when I tried to armbar him and he slammed my head on the ground and realized this is why there's weight classes.
yep. Um, I like that Jordan gives us a definitive example. He's not just telling us how clever Sawan is. We've kind of heard it, but now we see it in action. Um, as Tatalia says uh, down at the bottom of 169 is you have only read of the game. So she's never seen the game played. She's never played it herself. She's only heard of it, and yet she can make the connection with that game and with what she's being shown here. So we get a we get a definitive example, and then she gets dragged off. Um, another little nugget here that just adds to the uh, tangle within a tangle. At the bottom of 172, we're now on Sawan's perspective, and she's kind of ranting about what she was spent the day doing. And Moiraine sat up straight, suddenly very interested. So Talia heads the blue Ajah eyes and ears. It was not a question. Trust her to see straight to the heart of right away. Don't even whisper that. The bloody woman will boil me down like an oil fish if she learns I let it slip. So you're not even supposed to talk about it within the blue. And it makes you wonder how many people know, like know, and how many people just assume based on what she does that this is their eyes and ears. And they're not even allowed to talk about it within each other like they are with the first selector. Um,
Well, that's kind of a spy thing in general. We see the blacks do that later, or we've seen the blacks do that. When Leandrin's crew gets together, they talk about how they only know one other, all of them,
mhm,
because then there's no way they can accidentally out each other because you don't even know who's who.
good point. Yeah. Um, Best way to keep a secret is to not tell anybody, and they
Well,
take that very seriously.
that's the theory. That's the theory about cognitive dissonance. It's easier to deceive somebody when you've already deceived yourself.
That's a good point. Um, all right. Chapter 13. Not a ton to talk about here, except I think this was something that was asked of Jordan, and I should have gone and looked this up, but he was asked several times in the Q&A, where does the tower get all its money? Because they're paying a stipend once a year of 1,000 crowns gold. Um, and they can draw more if needed. Just be careful, or the hall will start overlooking your TPS reports. Um, so let's see. Yeah, so here it is where Swan's thinking about putting that amount of money in perspective. Swan's eyes grew very round reading the amount, and impossible as it seemed, wider still at mention of getting more. Few merchants cleared more gold in a year, and many minor nobles made do with far less. But the tower could not afford to have sisters seen in poverty. The Sun Palace had taught Moiraine that power often grew from others deciding that you already had power. An appearance of wealth could give that, and it's something we've actually seen in the series a few times to date. Specifically, when when Moiraine gets rid of all of Rand's clothes and has finer things like the kind of things a noble would wear, so that he can be seen to be important. Um,
I've got an answer from Reddit. I don't know if this came from Jordan himself or not, but they have all the money because they own the biggest bank on the continent, and so therefore receive tribute from pretty much every country. So basically, they are money lenders, and they're the Goldman Sachs of the world. They're basically making
yeah,
interest on everybody else's money.
it
They're the penultimate investor.
yeah, I think he probably took a lot of inspiration from the papacy and the papal states back when that was a thing. If you look at if you
That's part two of the answer. Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at old maps of Italy before it was unified, like there's huge chunk right in the middle, like right across the whole peninsula is labeled the Papal States because the papacy actually owned it. The church owned all those lands. So you've also got that. There are probably some degree of taxes in Tarvalon and its surrounding villages. That river is huge with traffic, with merchant traffic, huge for business. And then I did remember him saying something to the effect of um, other countries would send tribute, uh, basically to stay in their good graces. Um, it wasn't something that was like demanded, like in order to like the Ottoman Empire had all these buffer states in the Balkans that were quasi-independent, but they maintained that independence by paying a yearly tribute to the Ottoman Empire. So it's not quite like that, but you don't want to get on the bad side of the Aes Sedai. So they annually send some money.
That, and they're pretty much the oldest institution, period. At some point, when you've made money for a while, now your money makes money. And
Yes.
they've had the longest to do that of any place on the continent after the breaking.
Um, Speaking of bankers, I like the interchange here between the exchange between Moiraine and her banker. Um, that uh, all the layers that are happening here with one, somebody came in trying to get information on Moiraine, and two, somebody came and already got that information claiming they were an agent of Moiraine. So you've got, two different things already going on. And I like being able to see how Moiraine is thinking these things through and trying to navigate all of these. Um, but then I like the kind of the end of it. On the bottom of page 181, you have done very well by me, Mistress Dormail, to the pain of your house. Please transfer a suitable recompense from my accounts to your own. Very properly, the banker demurred twice, bowing her head before accepting with a show of reluctance that Moiraine barely noticed. Um, and then she immediately begins planning in her head, okay, I'm doubly screwed here because somebody in Karheen thinks that I'm a contender for the throne, which I absolutely do not want. And then somebody here in Tar Valon is playing that game, and I don't want to be roped into it.
And she also knows the Blues will use you however they want or they think is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And if
Yeah.
they think her as queen of Karheen is the best thing for the world, you will do it.
Um, and then we move on to the making of dresses, which
I thought that was kind of boring, personally.
I there were interesting nuggets in there though. I like the kind of upside down hierarchy here of here you have someone who's a noble and not a minor noble. Moiraine is of the house that most
She's
recently had
being
the throne,
she's being considered for queen.
and she's an Aes Sedai on top of that, and yet this person has so much skill and is in such demand that she can get away with a degree of arrogance that very few would have with someone of the stature of Moiraine and Siuan as well, being a full Aes Sedai now. Um, I
Well,
like
this is
that.
actually a good example of something we just talked about. The seamstress is deferent to Moiraine, but still does her own thing
That's a good point.
and makes sure that if you don't make her happy, you're being punished in some way.
Oh yeah, that was the other thing I liked was the if you annoyed her passive aggressive way of getting back at you.
Yeah. Well, and this could have been if and it may be in Jordan's mind why he put this here, a lesson in how you are deferent but still don't do as you're told.
But the other thing I think this scene serves is to demonstrate Sawan's character and how much she has to learn to get where she eventually ends up. Because she doesn't understand these nuances. She's very sharp. She's very good at figuring out puzzles, as we just saw. But this is something utterly alien to her. This world is completely alien to her. She came from the slums and went straight to the most exclusive private school in the world and has been cloistered in there basically. I mean, we saw I think that's part of why uh why he wrote those early chapters the way he did of how over the moon, giddy with excitement the accepted were at just getting to go outside.
Mm-hmm.
Not just to the city itself, but they're actually crossing the bridges and leaving the island. Oh my gosh. That's so you see that they're very cloistered. They rarely leave that place until they become full sisters.
Well, and one of the things you see in these first several chapters from the beginning of the book till here and a little bit further is that Swan and Moiraine, one of the things they have in common, albeit in different ways, is we brought up Trickster and blah blah blah. They're more masculine in some ways. And
Mm,
this is why I texted you right after our last Wheel of Time one, where I said I wanted to bring up the Riley Gaines interview,
mm,
because she quoted a stat that I haven't fact checked yet, but it's an interesting topic for our social discussion, and I can fact check before then. But not like 94% of female CEOs were former college athletes,
mm.
because women in general are not competitive, but competitive women do well. And the CEO of the White Tower is the Emerald Seat. And Siuan here is showing a masculine trait of having zero fashion sense and
Mm.
zero interest in learning fashion sense. She has she has the mental capability of learning it, but she has no interest in learning it.
Um, we also see a little bit of the flip side there of Moiraine, kind of, as you pointed out earlier, it's the same but different. So Siuan has this to learn, and Moiraine has ingrained in her prudishness
Mm-hmm.
of she's surrounded by maybe a half dozen people, and she's getting completely naked in front of them, but it's like dropping your pants in a doctor's office versus dropping your pants in a accountant's office. It's probably you don't want to do that. But here it's what you do. It's expected. It's not immodest. And that's just one of the things that's ingrained in her that she has to kind of navigate.
So one of my clients, he's in his 50s and he has to go for his yearly checkups.
Oh
And
no.
his doctor's a little Asian girl. And every time he has the
Eh.
she goes, "Aren't you glad I'm not Dr. So and so from down the way? His hands are big."
Yep. Yep.
Oh, and
Yep.
I'm about the age I'm gonna have to start doing that. I'm gonna have to get the name of his doctor.
All right.
Oh, back on.
I think that was the last thought I had on that chapter, and I think that's probably a good place to leave it. Um, because we've gone on a bit here, and then next time we can go through kind of the acceleration. Things kind of speed up as Moiraine is gonna get the heck out of the tower. I like the way he uh lays the foundation for it here in this chapter, with her just suddenly on a whim having decided as they were leaving, oh yes, I also want these, which I also like that he doesn't spell out why she does that, because she wouldn't think, you know, this way, someone who comes, snooping about my affairs will think that I'm seriously considering. She wouldn't think that. The reader infers it by what she does and then what she thinks. So show don't tell. It's why we got into this rabbit hole in the first place, is because so much of the awfulness of modern writing in general, and including the Wheel of Time terrible series, is they just tell you so much. They don't actually show you. And it's boring. This is why this isn't boring. Even with something that we thought went on a little too long and certainly doesn't appeal to us guys, of, you know, half a chapter getting sized for dresses and talking about the kinds of patterns they want.
Now, word to the show producers: if you want to keep your male audience, keep that chapter in.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think we've read about that before, is that the kind of the scuttlebutt is they Bezos's edict was, I want my Game of Thrones, and Wheel of Time was supposed to be part of that. That they thought, oh, we're going to crush HBO because we'll have two Game of Thrones. The Rings of Power will be the more family-friendly version because Tolkien's more family-friendly, and then with Wheel of Time, we can have, some of the more titillating adult stuff that Game of Thrones was infamous for in its first season, which pulled so many eyeballs, and then they didn't do that.
Well, it's funny the direction they took. They were so vanilla when it came to nudity or anything like that, but they pushed provocative things that were social justice oriented.
Mm-hmm.
It was like do both. If you're gonna do it, do both. We don't want to just see Lan's butt. We want to see Moiraine too. Although she's the highest paid actress in the whole thing, she probably had something "I'm not going nude" or something in there
Hmm,
because I don't
hmm.
think she's ever done nudes. But because she was stage and then a couple of big movies, right?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think she started out with a lot of stage. All right. So let's get to the comments.
There's a
Um,
couple funny ones in there.
yeah. Um,
Well, but yeah, to the first one. Let's see. How do I have them? Newest first. Oh, newest first. So the that's not the first one. It's the last one. So the first one,
um,
you just described how 1,000 women have all their periods at the same time living together. Yeah, but at least you get it out of the way for the month. You get 3 weeks of bliss and everybody fights for a week and then 3 weeks of bliss.
yep. 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 Um, all right. So on Elida here, she's self-entitled. She resents Moiraine and Siuan because they spent much less time as accepted than she did. I don't think it's just that though. I think that's what I was talking about is
The itch powder prank probably helped.
yeah, but um see the way I read it though, I don't think Elida knew that they were the ones who did the itch powder because you find out here later that they got caught with trying to sneak the mice into her room. And that probably just enhanced her dislike for them that had been solidified really just recently because I'll bet she started to put two and two together then and realize they were probably responsible for these other things I did. Uh,
Well, but
but
then you add they picked blue, but also
exactly.
I think in the running up to it, either it was she was pushing them hard to be the perfect mentor and she was hoping they'd pick red, or
Be,
she saw the blue in them and wanted them to fail.
See, I think especially with the way the Mistress of Novices talks about it, and it makes Moraine second guess and think, wait, was was she actually trying to help us? I think she was, and I think that's part of what Scott's saying is she is so self-entitled that I think she fully expects that, well, of course, these two are going to follow my lead. I will be their patron. This is how I kind of glom on to them and their fame within the tower because they were kind of phenoms, young
Which would be
phenoms.
consistent with her reign as a Mirlan seat. They're going to love me because I'm tough and I'm doing the right thing.
Well, I thought you were going to say something else. It is also consistent with her glomming on to Morghese because she had that foretelling about House Traken and thought, boom, I'm gonna be right there where the important stuff is because I'm going to be important, by golly, I'm going to be someone. And I think she fully expected, because she's so arrogant, that one once I help these two pass the test, they will follow me, they will defer to me, I will have strong allies within the tower. And then not only do they reject that, they choose the polar opposite of Ajah, and they try and play this final prank on her that I think makes her realize that they've done this before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so then after that point, I think all of those things that is going to create animus that they're as strong or stronger. They went through novice and accepted faster, and they're the polar opposite Ajahs. I think that just created a lifelong enemy.
Yeah, especially when you add in the pranks, because I mean, Elida very much is "I am the law."
Yeah.
So
Yeah. How dare you? Well, I mean, that's why she's so pissed off when they see her subsequently because and it wasn't even whatever physical punishment might have come from the Mistress of Novices because of what she did. It was the embarrassment. It is she was lessened. How dare you make me seem less because I'm a light up, by golly. All right. Yeah, Boba Fett died in the belly of the Sarlacc. So yeah, we'll just ignore everything that happened after that.
Well, but even in the prequels, oh, we'll just have Jango Fett and Baby Boba Fett as the official Clone
Mhm.
Warriors. You know, I someone could correct me if that's actually the source material, but
No, yeah, it is.
it is
That's yeah,
okay. Well, never mind.
that's
I apologize for that comment. Then sorry, Disney. I can be wrong. You
yeah,
still suck.
that was Lucas. That was all him. He solo wrote the prequels. Um, all right,
Oh,
but
so
then
there was no source material from the.
no,
Oh, okay.
the prequels were 100% invention by Lucas
Well,
at the time.
then he did what I'm talking about. Oh, Boba
Yeah.
Fett was popular. Let's use that to sell this part of this.
Oh no, that's 100% true because there's an interview, I don't remember with who, talking about what they added in the special editions, and um that scene with Jabba was originally filmed. Um and so when they were inserting that, they while they were setting up the background for that shot, they just said, "Hey, you know what would be cool if we had Boba Fett here?" Oh, well, we've got the costume back here. Let's go get it. It had nothing to do with any sort of logic. It was just, hey, you know what would be cool because people like Boba Fett so much? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, all right. Anyway, um, and then the last comment there about I'm not convinced Elida wasn't trying to get Moiraine and Siuan disqualified. I mean, I've kind of already addressed that. I
Yeah.
don't think so. I think she was trying to I think she arrogantly thought I can do what I want, even if this is breaking the rules, because I'm a Lida, by golly.
Well, and she when we talk about the manipulation, as we talked about a lot in this episode, the skirting deference, skirting the truth and everything, Elida tends to have a very not subtle hand. So
Yes.
her trying to skirt the right and wrong there of it's not necessarily I'm a light, I can do this. It's well, this isn't exactly illegal, but I'm going to go in head first.
Versus the nuance that other Aes Sedai would take.
Yeah. And then the last one is because no woman ever came from the waste seeking to join the tower. Well, that's true, but I think what I was trying to say was nobody from the tower would have said, "Well, there's nobody in the waste that has this," and go looking.
Hmm.
Because it just seems like at least the whites would figure out, well, you know what? We've got this percentage of women consistent across this many cultures. There happens to be this one, even though we don't deal with them in general, that
Hmm.
wouldn't have this. That
Well,
makes no sense.
or the Browns. No Brown ever wanted to go out in the waste just to learn
Mm-hmm.
what's out there.
Yeah. Now we do see the animosity towards Aes Sedai where they won't approach them, and so, but I don't think it was ever specifically addressed that they went looking for sisters
Yeah,
or
yeah,
looking for people with talent.
I don't know if it ever is ever mentioned anywhere about sisters who go into the waste, and I have to assume it's because of the prejudice on the western side of the spine of the world that they assume that they're savages, they're barbarians out there. You not only is it dangerous to go out there, but you wouldn't want to. They don't have anything of value. They're savages. They're barbarians. All right.
Any other
So
spoilers before we go into the fun thing?
what was the spoilery thing that I told you we'll talk about was oh the oath rod.
Yes, yes.
So I think he's foreshadowing something we're going to see here in a couple of books, which is when the the Black Ajah hunters, Pavara and that group, they get the oath rod because they're thinking along the same lines that others have thought of. Well, a black sister would have to be able to lie, and so to test this, they release themselves from the oaths and then rebind themselves. Um, and the releasing is incredibly painful, especially for the black sister they do find, and they have her renounce all oaths.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not just that they unbind themselves from the three oaths, they take new oaths. They
Oh,
take
so they
new
still
oaths
have
to
the
the
ageless.
black.
They still have the ageless face then. Okay. Okay, that I completely missed that. So
Yeah. So so in order to talk about the Black Ajah, she has to unbind herself because they take oaths. And I think why am I brain farting on her name? Because I love her. She's one of my favorite side characters, the Brown.
Galena,
No,
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 the
no.
brown, Varen.
Baron. Oh, brain. I think she mentions this. Yes, she does because she's talking to Egwene about how, and she mentions the oath they take that she finds it amusing because there's kind of a poetic element to it of like, you know, they'll hold the secrets of the Black Ajah until the, you know, the something about near their death instead of all the way to their death. So because she drank poison, she's now free from the oaths. So she can tell Egwene all this stuff.
Funny little convenience. Convenience.
Yeah, it is one of my favorite scenes because I love that character so much and it's so bittersweet. Um she, in her own way, she goes out like a champ.
Mhm.
Um I think it's interesting. It kind of bookends Varen because she's there when we see um Huron, or was he the sniffer?
Huron
Ingtar.
was Huron was a sniffer. Yeah.
Ingtar. They're kind of bookends because we first meet her and she's part of that storyline in the Great Hunt, and we see Ingtar going out like a champ. That he has his moment of repentance, turns back to the light, and says, "This is where I choose to die, to you know to make a difference." And then Varen does the same thing. You have a very masculine scene here, and then a very feminine scene here with Varen, the same but different.
Mhm.
I like that so much, how he does that. All right, on to the fun stuff quickly before we both have to go back to work.
All right. So I made a little list of uh equivalents of MMA fighters to the characters of the book. Not all of them are main characters. Do you want to start with main characters or bit characters?
Now let's
Or
start with the
bounce
main
back and forth?
characters. Let's start with the main characters first. And I didn't make up a list. I thought about it, but you know these so much better than I do that uh when we were texting back and forth, I was kind of following along with you. There may be some where I disagree, and I'll point those out. But when we were texting back and forth, your list made a lot of sense to me.
Well, but there's also some MMA fighters that I'm like, I need to find an equivalent for this. So maybe we can discuss those too.
Mhm.
Uh, let me put those in my side notes here real quick. Okay, so Rand, my first choice in my head was Stipe Miocic, who used to be the heavyweight champion, tall, pretty clean cut, pretty a little bit country. Uh, but then I thought about John Jones for a while, and not only is he one of the best, he's the heavyweight champion right now, but he's got a dark side to him that keeps coming back. And the closer he got to the top, the more it crept up on him.
That was when you mentioned his name, that was my thought, was the kind of dual personality he has exhibited, because there are times where he is just incredibly likable. He is, he's the kind of guy where you know that when he's in a room, everybody's going to like him, everyone's going to want to be his friend. Then there's a time where he's an asshole.
Yeah, and well, let me go with Cam next because in the early days, John Jones uh, was very good friends with one of the old guys of the sport, Daniel Cormier, and that's my Tam.
Mm.
Is Daniel Cormier, one of the old guys, one of the respected guys, one of the teachers to the young guys. He was like a big brother to John Jones, not like a father, but still, the equivalence is still pretty good considering the age differences.
I'll tell you who I thought of for Tam, for some similar but very different reasons, was Don Fry, because not only is he one of the elder statesmen of MMA, but if you have not been following the sport for a very long time, you won't know what a badass he was, because he fought a lot in Pride and in the very early UFC before it got big. And so you won't know that this guy was a bad mamma jamma. Um, he 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 beat some very serious people. He you know he had some big time matches, but it's all kind of ancient history. If you kind of started watching when it exploded, which was the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, which was like 2001, I want to say, that aired. Anyway, so that was my first thought for Tam was Don Fry.
Uh, Don Fry was one of the guys I wanted to find a place for, but I have uh, thoughts on him that make him not a good Tam
Mm,
because he was a little bit of a misogynistic a-hole.
mm,
I say a little bit. He's got his opinions. Now, some of that is just about manliness in general and things along those lines. But yeah, definitely having met him in person, not exactly the role model type, although he was a great fighter. And let's see. I was looking for it. I got pictures with him, but I can't find them. Oh, I should have had that ready. So Don Fry, I still want to find a place for, but he was a little bit more of a gruff figure than
mm.
now. Yeah, maybe the patriotic, stand up tall, be a man, lumberjack type that would be there, but the nurturing,
Yeah, yeah.
the role model type, definitely not there. I had some coaches down like Greg Jackson and stuff that might have been good, Tam, because they turned around a lot of young fighters' lives that were suspect in their personal lives to begin with, and then that even though he might not have been the best trainer in the world or coach, even though he's definitely top five. You just look at record, but he definitely turned around a lot of lives. So that's why I kind of put them as honorable mention.
Under on that train of thought, a name that pops into my head, not a name, not over his whole career, but specifically, um, GSP when he was a an Ultimate Fighter coach on one of the early seasons. He was he was really shockingly philosophical and nurturing. That if you know if you only knew him as a fighter, then to see him as a coach, that was pretty impressive to me. The way he was, the way he talked about kind of the philosophy of martial arts, philosophy of training, and then the way he nurtured that whole team, I thought was pretty impressive. All right, so moving on before we get bogged down. Um, you want to stick with the guys and go
Yeah,
with
yeah, we're stick with the guys. There it is. No Limits Fight Championship. I helped corner him and did a little bit of the help with the weight cutting. And that's my coach on the left there, Silverio Guerra, who was also Dan Severn's coach for a long time. So, uh, Matt, this is the one that got me thinking about the list
mm,
because I don't know. I just woke up in the middle of the night and had the thought: if Matt was an MMA fighter today, he would be Cowboy Cerrone, and he's one of the best fighters. He's a Hall of Famer. He's got this. He's got the right attitude. He's respectful, but he's still independent. He was a company man, which when Rand orders Matt around and he grumbles and groans, but still does the job. Uh, and realistically, from an ability standpoint, no, he didn't win every fight, but he was a guy nobody wanted to fight
mm.
because he could beat anybody. He had the skill set to beat anybody. He was so well rounded, and it just depended on if he showed up in his best form that day, or sometimes the opponent just showed up and had the best fight of their life. Because sometimes you fight to your opponent, and he would bring the best out of everybody he fought. I don't know how many fight of the nights he got because he would fight somebody that should have had no chance, but they did well, or he fought somebody that he should have had no chance against, and he beat. So that was
And
my first
I
thought.
I liked your response to me because my first thought, because he is such an unorthodox, out of the box fighter, was Anderson Silva. But he's also a big showboat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the cool things about Matt is he's not a showboat. He's he's one of the baddest men on the planet, and he's just him. He's just a dude.
Mm-hmm. not only a dude, but a dude that kind of wants to fade in the background every once in a while, even though he keeps
Mhm.
getting pulled into the limelight because of his ability.
All right, now remind me, who did you have for Perrin?
Perrin is probably the toughest one. I thought of somebody like Andrei Arlovsky because he was, I mean, his start in MMA was basically as an anti-bully. He
Mhm.
wanted to not get bullied, and then he wanted to help other people not get bullied, and he became famous. And he's big and hairy, so that helps. Uh, so that's a good fit. But then I was thinking, well, maybe a dual personality where you have one side that's Perrin the blacksmith and one side that's Perrin the wolf. And for that, I have Rich Franklin as the blacksmith
Mhm.
and Vitor Belfort as the wolf
Yeah.
because they're both jacked. They both are. They're both very technical, but Rich Franklin is such in a soft manner, in a calculated, meticulated, educated manner, where
Former teacher,
Belfort
yeah.
was pure instinct. The guy was a phenom from the beginning.
Mhm.
And when he would
Yeah.
explode, he was, I mean, he is exactly how parents described in battle. His
Yeah.
fight with Tank Abbott, which put him on the map, this guy was supposed to get destroyed by Tank Abbott because he was destroying everybody at the time. And Belfort did what nobody expected. He went straight in.
Oh yeah.
He went straight into the guy who just knocks people out by looking at them, and blew him up in a few seconds. So that was kind of, I had two choices there, the overall match and the dual match, because Perrin could be a complicated character, Brando Sando, but
Mhm.
he ended up dropping that ball. Now Lan, I had as this is where I put Randy Couture. He's the grizzled veteran that's been around forever
Mhm.
and is one of the greatest of all time, and basically a bricklayer of the whole industry.
Yeah. Yeah. The kind of the well is actually relevant to New Spring because we're going to see when we get to Lance Parts and the way he plays such a vital role in Moraine's mission that you could, I mean, yeah, she knew about it. She knew what needed to be done, but she would not have been able to do it if he hadn't been there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if this warrior had not been there to, and Kotor's was a big part of how and why the UFC ultimately took off.
Gallad. Gallad, I've got two here, and I think one's the best fit, but another one I can just he was actually the first choice, the one that may or may not be the best fit, but I could justify up and down. The best fit is probably Lyoto Machida,
Mm.
the ultimate straight guy of the UFC, technical, traditional, uh, basically unbeaten forever.
And yeah, I like the traditional. I mean, this is a guy who is multiple black belts in a couple different martial arts, including classical karate.
Mm-hmm. Shotokan, yeah. Now the other one I had, which was a very, I think a good match, is Khabib, because Khabib not only did he retire undefeated as
Hmm.
the welterweight champion, but was it lightweight or welterweight? Both. Didn't he have both at some point?
I don't remember.
But he's also a super
Trying
straight
to.
laced dude that wasn't out there talking trash. And he would talk trash, but it was in a way of like he would just state a fact in the face of
Hmm.
somebody else talking trash. Like Connor would just go to town on him. And then he would just like, but I'm going to beat you.
Although with that's some gnarly cauliflower ear. He's hardly the prettiest guy.
No.
Um,
Gawain, this is the one that I think threw you off when we were texting.
yeah, what was it you said?
St. Pierre,
Uh, Yeah.
because there's really nothing wrong with him. And he's one of the most skilled people ever, but still you can't like him.
Yeah, that one was hard for me because especially in his heyday, GSP was one of my favorites and favorites to watch.
Which is funny
Um,
because during his heyday, everybody hated on him. And but when you really press somebody about why they hated on him, they're like, because he's too
uh,
good. He's too simple. I don't know.
yeah, Godwin is so dislikable, especially by the end of the series, though. That one kind of That one hurt. Because you're right, it does kind of fit, but oh, I don't like
Do you have
Gawain.
another one that you think would fit for him?
Um, no, but oh well, actually, yeah, because I had this thought about Gallad, and I think it could go for Gallad or Gawain, which is, and this is my bias, Michael Bisping, because he's really good, but he's a
Oh,
dick, and I don't like him.
that's a good one. But you know what? I hated Bisbing for the same reasons I hated St. Pierre for some reason. So it was they both fit, but Bisping actually might be better. That was a good one. That was a good one. Payton Fane. Who do you think I got
Oh,
here? Who do
I
you
didn't
think
even
I got
think
here?
about that.
It's going to be so obvious when you hear it.
I mean, the only name I can think of, I know, I'm pretty sure you have for somebody else, which is um Tito,
I do have him for
because
somebody else.
yeah, because he was he was such a smiling, charismatic guy, but it was a sleazy car salesman kind of way. That's how he always came off to me like a sleazy car salesman.
Nate Diaz.
Ah!
You can't help. He's just the slimiest guy in the industry, and he keeps beating people he had no business beating, like slashing Rand with the dagger, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
like oh, the guy you wish would go away, but he's the Gollum of the UFC.
That's an interesting way to put it.
All right, so now more bit characters, except for one. Tom, I'm going to save Tom for last. So we already said tame. No, we didn't say tame. Oh, that's where I put Don Fry. Tame,
Mm.
powerful. He's capable. He's even charismatic. But yeah, he's kind of a shithead in some ways. Now, Don Fry isn't evil, but he's got his flaws. So, but that's a loose fit. But I was really just looking for a place for Don Fry, and that one kind of came up. Uh, Uno.
Foul-mouthed bad mama jamma. Who would that be?
Switch the missing eye for just a deconstructed nose, and you got Dan Henderson.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I
Face
didn't know.
first into trouble. This one you're gonna like. Vannon. A sack of potatoes that you're like, oh my god, he's actually good.
Oh, the heavyweight guy. Is that who it
Well,
is?
it's got to be a heavyweight. He's a sack
No,
of
no, no.
potatoes.
God, what is his name? Yeah, the guy that's all jiggly and yet he beats people. And you're like, how did he do that? And he can high kick. And you're like, how did he do that? What's the guy's
Roy
name?
Nelson.
Roy Nelson. There you go.
And he's also backwoods country. You can imagine him missing a few teeth
Yeah.
if he didn't have the mouthpiece in. Yeah.
Oh, shucks, man.
Yeah, when he was on the Ultimate Fighter, you're like,
He
okay.
ain't gonna last.
And then he makes it to the championship.
How is he still here? It makes no sense.
All right, Samael.
Oh yeah. So this is the guy that's second best. He's great, but he's always second best,
Nope, you're
right?
thinking of the Demandred.
Demandred, that's Demandred.
Yeah,
Yes, yes, yes.
Samael is where I put Tito Ortiz.
Yeah, okay.
Overconfident, his mouth outpaces his ability, but he still has
Hmm.
ability.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and the consummate bad guy.
yeah, yeah, he was.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, it's all right. So I brought him up. So remind me who you had as Demandred.
Chael Sonnen, silver medalist, runner up for middleweight championship, runner up for lightweight championship,
Mhm.
number one contender, lost championship fight, number one contender, lost championship fight, big
That
mouth,
the fight he had with
grandiose,
Silva, he had that. You thought, oh my gosh, he's gonna do it. He's gonna upset Silva, and
and
then
then he walks into a triangle
and he just
in the fifth
walks
round.
one of the
He just
most
says, "Here's my
basic
arm
things.
and neck."
One of the first things you learn in jiu-jitsu.
That
Here,
one, see,
have it.
to me, that is the UFC moment that looks like a fixed fight. Because he basically, I mean, granted, it's the 5th round and everybody's tired, but he basically had his body between his legs and punched him like this. And that's exactly how you get triangled. But who knows? But he's also boisterous and Demandred. We see him in the last book doing that in his little challenging everybody to a sword fight. And so he is a showman. Let me see. Robin. This one you might not know.
I don't know. Is there a ladies' man in
The baby-faced assassin Josh Barnett. He was incredibly skilled, but in the end, he was a champion for a while. He was UFC heavyweight champion for a while. But so big, tall, everything you would think of as a Robin. And he won with finesse. He was a massive individual, but he would finesse his opponents till he won. And that's exactly our complaint about Robin. He was super powerful with the power. He was the most powerful Forsaken with the power, except for maybe Ishii. And he was a massive dude, but he tried to finesse Rand in the end, and it was his undoing. Yeah. So you might not know this guy either, but Bale, Stefan Struve, the skyscraper, 6'7". And he had skill. He was a number 1 contender at one point. He never won the championship. I think the last one I have is Tom. I was looking for a place for Anderson Silva, Boss Rutan, and BJ Penn were other places I was looking for someone.
I was trying to find a place for Ken Shamrock, or not Ken Shamrock, Frank Shamrock.
Frank Shamrock. Yeah, I was thinking about them too, but they're kind of vanilla in a way. So it was kind of tough because I'm thinking of people that had something that really stuck out. But Tom is the only one I queued up a video for. Did you ever guess? Because you didn't get it the first time. You thought Anderson Silva at first because of the showboating.
Yeah, no, I don't think I ever guessed. I don't think you said.
All right, so I better put the screen on the right one. Here we go. Now I'm not going to share with sound just in case we get a copyright violation. Kazushi Sakuraba. The Gracie Hunter. So a great combination of one of the greatest showmen in martial arts and one of the most skilled.
Oh man. No, I don't know this guy, but that is I don't think this is Pride. I can't tell the
Yeah, that's Pride.
Okay, it is. It's one of the things I miss about Pride, and I don't remember who I heard talking about this of.
That's Vitor Belfort, by the way. He's fighting right there.
That this was something that made Pride a lot of fun that they kind of killed when the UFC acquired it, and they should have. I remember who I heard talk about saying they should have kept this going.
I think that's one of the Gracies. That's Henzo, I think.
The way they would come in like it was a professional wrestling match.
Well, the Japanese productions were all showy like that to begin with, but he was kind of the top of the top in a showy organization.
But then you had some real great fights, like some legit. You know, there's all the showmanship coming in, and then here you go, you got a legit guy. You know, really 2 legit guys really going at each other.
Switch from that Kimura to that armbar like that. That's crazy. Yeah, this was the one I was like, this is perfect. But yeah, his fights with the Gracies, there's a clip in there that comes up where he takes Royce Gracie, who's still wearing his gi, grabs him by the gi, turns him upside down, puts him on his head, and starts spanking his butt.
Oh, I remember that. I've seen that clip. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. Last one for me. I said Loyal as Overeem because he's freaking huge.
Oh yeah.
I don't know why
might be a good one there too.
I don't know why I didn't think about Bob Sapp.
Because I mean, you got to have someone at least smart.
This is true.
Yeah, Bob Sapp was a beast. I mean, he was called the Beast. But
and especially if you watch some of his K1 fights, and you're like, why are those two guys in the ring together? That guy's huge.
Yeah, on the female side, I thought of one off the top of my head was Birgitte as Holly Holm.
Hmm.
Tall, blonde, good looking, and precision strikes. Just hitting the nail on the head every time. Uh, but again, my knowledge of female fighters isn't that great.
Yeah.
I had some thoughts of Ronda Rousey because her temper is so great and she's kind of a one trick pony, so she could have been naive, but she also could very much be an Elida too because
Yeah.
she's her personally, unless it's all an act, she's kind of a shithead. So yeah,
All right. Well, hopefully that was something we had a little fun with. It was nice to have some fun because we teased a couple days ago. We brought up the Durham report and I downloaded it and I've been looking over it and
oh
I
yeah,
think
I need
I
to
think
read
that
that.
episode is going to be titled "It's Worse Than You Think." Uh, so it's nice to have a break and have a little fun. So we will see y'all next week for some terribleness, and then at the end of the week we'll have some fun with the next handful of chapters. Uh,
Because
I,
it does
I
get fun. That's
I think we could easily do it in two. We might be able to get through it in one, but I doubt it. Because stuff always comes up that we think, I didn't think about that. And yeah, so we should have probably two more episodes of New Spring, and then we'll be on to Path of Daggers.
all
So
right. Nice.
see
All
y'all
right.
next time.
See y'all next time.